Hey there, this is Sheryl, mental toughness coach, published author, speaker, and mother to a couple of great kids who happen to be high school and college student athletes. This is chapter 2 in my parents' guide to mental toughness for teens. This guide was created because parents came to me over and over with some of the same questions, such as, how can I best help my teen before an important event? Or maybe, how do I help them plan? Or maybe, what do I say to them after an event that doesn't go so well? So this is chapter 2, and it's titled Objectives. First, we're going to talk about long-term objectives. These are really important when it comes to teens and their planning, especially their long-term dream that they have for themselves. Here's an example. It's a little bit of an extreme example, but it speaks to my point nonetheless. Michael Jordan had a dream when he was 15 that he wanted to be a major contributor on his varsity basketball team. After he tried out, he was told he wasn't good enough, and he ended up playing on the JV team. So understandably, he was very upset. Clearly, he didn't quit. So he was upset for a while and then went back and practiced really, really hard, and I guess the rest is history. The point that this speaks to is that long-term dreams or your long-term objectives do not succumb to temporary setbacks or failures. It's really important for teens to understand this. They need to set a long-term objective and then just assume it will happen and not worry about it on the day-to-day. So why is setting long-term objectives so important? Well, setting these type of objectives can be one of the most important skills that students or athletes can learn to help them achieve optimal performance. This is all in the sports psychology research over and over again. So it's really important for teens to understand what and how these goals function. And as parents, we're going to explain a little bit about what and how they function as well so you can best support your teen. Here's a few things to keep in mind about long-term objectives. As in the title, they're long-term, so typically about 6 months to 4 years plus. They should be realistic, but they can be slightly unrealistic. Even if they're not too realistic, they should be at least somewhat possible. Also, they're way off in the future, so again, there's no need to worry about them in the day-to-day. Also, teens have very minimal to no control. So parents can help them by reminding them of this and helping them to remember to be at peace with it. Here's a parent tip. Ask your teen what would they be really, really proud of themselves of, or what would make them really, really happy that they accomplished a couple years down the road. Then ask them why this is so important to them. Try and catch them when they're fed and not in a hurry. The second type of objective is an intermediate term objective. Again, let's start off with a short story. There was a freshman girl who was thrilled to have made the JV volleyball team. Once she made the team, though, her excitement soon wore off because she was really worried about getting playing time and if it would actually happen. So her long-term objective was to eventually be on the varsity volleyball team as a senior. But what about now? How could she increase her ability on the junior varsity team so she would be most likely to get some playing time? If a teen wants to know how to have measurable improvement, then intermediate term objectives are really great, especially if kids are at the beginning or in the middle of a season. Why is this important? Well, these intermediate term objectives help teams be very deliberate and focused, and they also help them focus on what they have control over rather than other things that are completely out of their control and usually pretty distracting. So there are a couple things that parents should know about intermediate term objectives. The first thing is the time period is about 2 weeks to 6 months. Teens also have some control, so it's good to remind them of that, but they don't have total control. In other words, they might have control over how much they practice, but they might not have control over outside distractions. Also, intermediate term objectives need to be measurable and realistic. They can be a stretch, and even they should be a stretch, but they need to at least be measurable. So here's an example of a volleyball player above. She was serving at about 70% of what she felt her capability was, but she knew in the next few weeks that she needed to increase that to 85%. Here's a parent tip. Ask your teen what or couple just one or two of the most important skills, either for their academics or for their sport, of what they can practice and how they can get better. Then encourage them to write these couple things down. Remember that these intermediate term objectives need to be quantifiable or measurable so they can measure progress. The third type of objective is called a short-term objective. And again, we're going to start with a short story. There was a sophomore high school student who was a sprinter, and he wanted to get faster in his shorter distance races. He eventually wanted to run on the varsity track team as a senior and also qualify for the state championship. Those were his long-term objectives. He realized that right now his form and endurance were about 70% of what he was capable of, and he needed to get to 90%. Those were his intermediate term objectives. But what could he do on a daily basis in the coming week or two to help him improve? What he could do is set some short-term objectives for himself. These are the small, important steps that teens take to their long-term aspirations down the road. Here are a couple things that parents can keep in mind when trying to guide their teen towards setting short-term objectives. The first one is, like the name says, they're very short-term, so immediate to 2 weeks down the road. Here's something that's very important. Short-term objectives are very specific as to time, place, and exactly what will get done. Teens also need to be reminded they have total control over these. Either they're going to do them or they're not. Let's go back to the track athlete. He decided that in order to accomplish his long-term and intermediate-term objectives, these would be the short-term objectives that he would set for the coming weeks for himself. He would run a couple of sprints Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 4 to 4:30 before practice. He would also check his calendar on Sunday night to make sure all of his studies were taken care of, so that wouldn't pose a problem either. If he really had a heavy load of homework, then he would plan to do a little bit of it in the morning or during lunch. It's really important to encourage teens to write these short-term objectives down so they can plan them and they know exactly when they will happen and what they're going to do. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I encourage you to visit my website at www.sherylkline.com for access to more videos as well as an opportunity to sign up for my free newsletter. Also, there's going to be some information on my course that's out titled A Teen Guide to Mental Toughness. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.